So let's do this search bar. So I actually got the placeholder show up. It just started magically working for me, so I'm gonna rock out with it. So here we are. We want to do every time we type, right? We want to send a search request out, or every time we hit enter, probably every time we submit the form. Probably submit for now. Then we can work on the type ahead. But really, our const search for pets. Whatever event that we put it on, we're going to need some sort of function for it. Down here on submit. So here, really, this is just going to be an Axios call, right? We're going to say, hey Axios, go to HTTPS, localhost 5001/API/search/pets, and my query equals event.formData.search. Right? So we're saying, hey, go do my get, use whatever I'm searching for, whatever's in my search bar, take whatever I've typed there, and send that out to my API. And then whenever I get back, we want to log out the response just to see it. And then we want to say, hey, set pets with resp.data.results. So we know it's resp because that's the response. That response has data. That's what's inside the body. What's inside the body is what we care about is the results. That's really what we care about, right? So now, if I've hooked this up right, this should work. I made a lot of changes though, so we'll see what happens. So if I do a search for Lil, oh, it works. T, wow, it works. If I do a search for pit bulls, do a search for cats.
And it's very fast.
It is. It's very fast. So, yeah.
It seems to me like the more you'll add to it. Say, for example, you want to take this as a mock and then end up adding more to it. That's the more attributes that you're going to have to add to it. So if you're looking for something, you got to basically say this and that in order for it to make sense to. Okay.
Yeah, that's where the complexity comes in.
Okay.
Is like, oh, if we only add a property to our pet, how does that affect our system?
Okay.
And that's where the design process of the agile software process comes into mind. It's like, oh, if I wanted to add gender to our pets, or like is spaded or neutered, like those two properties should be relatively easy, right? But do I display them somewhere? Do I store them? Where do I store them? Do I search by them? Can I search by them? How do we search by them? How does it affect everything that goes into this? It's nothing hard. It's just we kind of have to like, know what's happening.
Okay.
That was actually a lot easier than I was expecting.
So what if you say you have one shelter, but that one shelter deals with primarily what we have now, and then say, for example, owner wants to branch out and do a habitat shelter.
So do another shelter.
Yeah, another shelter just dealing with like more habitat animals like
Yeah.
lions, tigers, bears.
Yeah.
And stuff. Okay.
So now we need to be able to add a shelter.
Ah.
It's a natural segue into another
Oh.
thing.
Okay.
Yeah, right? It's like, so we already have 2 shelters. We have Loving Pets and Shady Acres.
But wait, didn't we, before we go there, didn't we have another search criteria for like the kid friendly and?
Yep. So our kid friendly can have 3 values, right?
Yeah.
Yes, no, and doesn't matter. How do we want to represent that inside of our UI? A little bit of design talk here. We could have maybe radio buttons. We could have a drop down,
Drop down would probably sound make more sense.
probably. But there's no wrong answer to that. At least today there isn't a wrong answer. Maybe tomorrow, next week, but today there's not a wrong answer. So let's do a drop down. So let's add a drop down to our form. Inside of here, good with kids. You are a type string, title, good with kids, or probably kid friendly. Default. Default to null. And then with drop downs, we have to give it 2 things, what the values are. So nothing and true and false. But we want to show names doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Yes. No. And let's give, that should be actually. Names. Enum names. So it doesn't matter, kid friendly, yes or no. And moving this. So now here we want to go let URL equals that. If event.formData dot what do I call it? Good with kids. Good with kids does not equal an empty string. Then we want to go, hey, URL plus equals question mark good with kids equals this. So if it matters, we want to add it to the URL, add it to our search criteria, and send that off to the API. Why do we have an error?
Like this with the pet one, that might be different than ones with the universe.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe not. Is that or like like with the movies and Star Wars and stuff, you could have one, like your object being more than one table, like shelter, so to speak, like a
Mhm.
character could be in more than one movie.
Yep.
Does that make sense? Or a character could be in more than one universe, but this isn't the case.
No, but a shelter can have multiple pets.
This is like a
No.
one to many versus a many to many kind of thing.
Yeah. So if I want to search for Lily, let's do doesn't matter. Cannot read protocol of undefined. What?
It's like this. It's one.
Oh.
If they're doing students to a cohort, for seeking.
Was your question answered? Was it?
Yes.
Okay. Just want to make sure.
It's not, I mean, you can't change it. So,
I mean, we could change it to something else. We could add something here. And we just might. But let's get this, and then we'll chat about that. So yeah, so if it doesn't matter, you notice that it doesn't add it to our search query. But if it does matter, it's now going to pass the parameters with it, which is going to use the endpoint that we know works. So it's just a little bit of client-side logic to go, hey, do we care if it's good with kids or not?
So if you, instead of returning blank page, because you get that, people would think that something didn't go wrong.
Yeah, right?
You just want to say no results found.
So what we can do down here is we can go, hey, if pets dot length is greater than 0, then display the pets. Else pets dot length equals 0. Then display, H3 no results found for no results found. You can do something like that where it says, hey, have we seen this dynamic rendering before? So this is conditional rendering inside of React. It looks a bit weird. I'll be honest, it does. Because it's using a short-circuiting effect of JavaScript. So let's put our JavaScript hats back on for a little bit and kind of go back into the world of nonsense and chaos.
Andrew's smiling.
I know.
No, no.
I
That's
know.
why it's being recorded.
Yeah.
That's why I'm asking on this.
No, that's good. So here, this is saying, so first off, let's back up a little bit. Nope. So in JavaScript, if we have A and B, that returns true, right? If they're both true. If we have A and B and one of them is false, it returns false, right? The basic truth tables of an AND statement. But what JavaScript actually does is that if this returns true, it actually returns the value of B. So we can use that. So like this AND is the functional equivalent. Let's just do const answer equals that. Is the functional equivalent of A and B return B or false. So like these two lines are functionally equivalent because that's how JavaScript works. It doesn't return the actual like truth value per se. If it's true, it returns the truthy value of the second, which is still truthy because JavaScript is fun. So what does that mean for us? So for us, we can use this logic to go, hey, if some condition is true, show some HTML. So over here in our JSX, we can go, hey, if that is true, then show me this list. So if the pet length is greater than 0, if pets have something, then show me that pet list. The drawback is that there's no else statement here. There's no like if and then else. But we can just go, hey, if pets.length equals 0, then show me no results found. So this is just a detour way to do, if this is true, show me this, else then show me that. How does that feel?
Guess we only have the time to see no results found. Because you're like, oh.
Yeah.
So it's really cool.
And of course you can make that no results found a bit more complex and say, hey, is it loading, is it not loading? Is it looking, is it not looking, and stuff like that.
Also, you're able to give it better definitions then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How would you do that?
So, how would I do that? Well, we would have something new in state that says is loading, set loading equals use state true, and then down here we can say, hey, if it's loading, then say div loading results. So we can go, hey, if pets.length is 0 and you're not is loading, so it's going to go, if it is it not loading and there's no results found, show the not results found. If it's loading, show that. Then everywhere where we come back, set is loading. I call it set loading. I did. False. There. Set it there. And before we go out, set it equal to true. So we just use a Boolean flag to kind of help track to see what's going on. So every time we send off an AJAX call, we go, yep, we're loading. Every time we come back, we go, we're done loading. Show me something. So loading results, found results. Terry. It's too quick, so like we don't see it happening. But if there's nothing found, no results found. So, but actually, if we can go through, and here's a fun little thing for you to learn, know about, is that there's actually a way you can change your internet speed. So if I do a slow 3G, loading results.
But I like that's cool.
Can you
Yeah.
imagine if you said it and then forgot that you said it? God, why is this running so slow?
So can you put, I prefer that when you don't see a website telling you that the results are loading. I don't know why, I don't really care for letting me know. But I mean, that's just a personal preference.
Yeah.
But unless there's something neat happening, like there's an the animation. So that's when you get really into it, right?
Yeah, like this loading message should probably be like a little GIF circle or like a little, maybe like little paw prints walking, like,
Okay.
you know. Yeah, right? It was super cute. But that's for the designer and UI person to worry about.
So then, okay.
We just go, you know what? You have a div. It has a class name of loading icon. Put whatever CSS on that class and it'll work.
Then I will fill in it, like,
Yeah. Because I think little paw prints would be fun. Or like paw prints with like a magnifying glass on, like.
yeah, that would be really neat. So is that best practice to have a loading results?
Yeah, just something. And because the user always wants to see something happening.
That it's not stuck, that it's not
Yeah.
done.
Mm-hmm.
See,
So-
I thought when I do see that, the loading results, that it was an older website.
Nope, that's it letting you know that it's doing something. Instead of it waiting to do something until 3 seconds later, it's going, I'm doing something, here they are. Instead of just, here they are. And ideally, you shouldn't have loading screens, but this is the real world and it happens. Because internet is unreliable. So yeah, that's our search with our nice friendly loading message now. Not stylish, but friendly.
So there are times it will be so fast that you won't even see the loading.
That's the idea.
That's why I don't like it. Okay, so
Yeah. And really it's now like it's about 2 seconds. If your website doesn't do something within 2 seconds, the user thinks it's busted. So like if you have a really long query, then you need to show them something within 2 seconds to make it look like your website's doing something so that it doesn't think it's
that
busted.
makes sense.
So if you go to like Facebook, you know how it's like it loads like shadows of everything first, and then it loads the text. Have you ever seen that?
See it on other websites.
Or on other websites too? I think Facebook started it and then got rid of it. I still see it on my Facebook, so I assume everyone sees it. But that kind of like fake like shadows isn't actually your content. That's just placeholders. It's going, oh, something's coming here. So just kind of be ready for it. That's a way to help increase your page speed, at least perceived.
So we do pages for the pets now?
So we need to add a shelter. We also need to page for pet.
But I'm not sure what more detail we're gonna get on that page compared to what you're getting here.
It could be, like, well, at least on Pet Finder, it could be a description of how they were,
Yeah.
put up for adoption and their background.
Yeah, we can be like their story, a map to the shelter, to where they are. You can do stuff like that.
Yeah, Facebook still does all the placeholder shadowing and stuff.
So they were the first site that I saw do that, and it's since they did, now everyone's doing it. So it's 11:30, and let's add a shelter page. Because as Manny brought up, this is nice. We have 2 shelters, but what if we wanted another shelter, right? Like something that was like specialized towards lions and tigers and bears and stuff like that.
Oh my.
Oh my! So let's commit this.
And there is one in
Arizona.
There's a tiger sanctuary like over in Tampa.
Yeah, big cats.
Oh, that's Big Cats. I bought them.
It's wild.
What's wild is that I lived like 2 blocks away from it for 2 years and I never went.
Aw.
Right? I ride my bike past it. I never went down the road. I'm so mad at
No,
myself.
if something was that big was chasing you.
But the road looks so much fun because you couldn't see it from the road, and it was just a dirt road that leads back to it. So it's a dirt road that leads back into the woods, and then there's tires at the end of it. So, anyways, we added search feature. So what do we want to do? We want to add a new page, right? We want to add a new page that has a form on it, that has where I can just add a new shelter. Nothing too crazy.
Could you comment that part out too? Saying like what you're about to do?
Yeah, sure. So let me add the new page. Add a shelter.js, RCC, add shelter page. So what I'm about to do is I'm going to add, create the component, create the React component for the page. I'm going to populate the component with HTML. I'm going to hook up the new component with React Router. I'm going to add the new page to the menu. I'm then going to submit the new shelter using the forms library we've been using. And then I'm going to show a link to go to the add pet page after we create a shelter. So that's the high level. If we didn't have the API built, right here, 5.5, actually 5.1, build the API, but we already have that done, already scaffolded out for us. So we don't have to do that. Typically we would, but now we don't. Thoughts on this? I mean, now it's just a giant checklist. So we created the React component. Need to populate with the HTML. Which is going to be what, the top bar, the nav bar, and then section, this is where the form goes. Form goes here. Created the page, did some HTML. Let's add it to the router. Let's make the shelter / add a add shelter page. Then add it to the menu, nav bar. Link shelter / add. Right? Shelter / add, shelter / add. Let's do create a shelter. Register a shelter. So now let's check that. Where's my?
I think you have two, if you go to adopt a pet, add a pet.
Adopt a pet, add a pet, and register. It was just still building. So awesome.
Is the Pets R Us, is that a header page or is that part of the nav?
That is the top bar component.
Okay.
So the top bar is the Pets R Us. The nav bar is the bar below it. Do we want to use hooks?
Yes.
It's nice to get more hooks practice.
Yeah. So we'll probably have a use state here. Export default function there we go. All right, so now we want to add import forms from that. And our form, let's see, what do we want to add for a shelter? So we have these properties, right? Name, address, is no kill, max capacity, current capacity, primary contact name, contact phone, and adoption fee. So do we need to add all of these things? We'll probably leave off these two, right? Or probably leave off this one. Because the current capacity for a new shelter is going to be 0. Yeah. Max capacity is going to be set to something. So yeah. Make a form that has these things. So over here, I'm actually going to, you don't need to see that, so I'll pull that over there. Const schema equals steal this. Register shelter. So now since we're using this library, all we have to do is really define what goes into our form, and it will make our form for us. So the name is the shelter name. The address, type string. The title is shelter address, full address. Is no kill, your Boolean, is no kill, are you no kill shelter, default is true, max capacity, and all I'm doing is just saying, hey, what's all the properties on my model? And let's put them in the form. It's always good practice to name them what your model field is. That way you can easily transport data from the client to the server. Max capacity. Primary contact name, type string, title who was in charge, primary contact phone, type string, who we gonna call, and the adoption fee, type number, title what are we gonna bill? All right. So now I want to go here. I should, in theory, see my adoption form or my shelter. Typos. My submit. So now, which one of these are, how much of this is required?
Okay.
Probably the name, the address, and probably the primary contact and the primary contact's phone number. Really, everything else is really nice to have, but it's like, hey, where's your building? Where is it? What's it called? And who can I call? So we can actually say, hey, you know what's required? The name, the address, primary contact, and primary phone.
So in the display, is that that's the red asterisk?
Mm-hmm. See, now they're asterisked. And we can go in and actually style that if we wanted to. And let me inspect that. So like, see how it's a class required? CSS. This is us taking the Bootstrap stuff and extending it ourselves. We want you to be red. Oh, we have a theme for that. Do we have a red somewhere? We do.
Remember, that's purple.
That is. Oh, that is purple. It's not for me. I can tell you that. Color red, and you know what? Just to make sure it's known, it's huge. We can take the classes that they give us and say, hey, every time you see the required class, apply this style. It gets the point across.
Hey, pay attention to these.
Yes. And then,
Who's
Who's in charge? To be fair though, it's kind of right in the middle of the upper and lower ones, so it could be kind of confusing.
it could be, which one is? Oh, yeah.
It looks like a border break.
Yeah.
I mean, realistically, these shouldn't be 3 EMs or 5 REMs. It was probably a padding left of 0.25 REMs. Just to get them off that a little bit.
Yeah, there you go. That's all.
Wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And since it's required, if I hit submit, it will actually stop me and say, hey.
So it's already.
Yep. No name. Yep. So let's do this. Let's do. What's the name of our new shelter?
Freedom Farm.
Freedom Farm. Over there,
Over the hill.
behind the barn. Who's in charge? Farmer Gump. And who are we gonna call? Ghostbusters.
You planned that.
I might have. But then, so now that I've put in all the only required fields, it's letting me submit it. It's not doing anything because we didn't actually hook up the submit event yet. But it's not giving me a message saying, hey, you gotta do this, you gotta do this. So now let's actually hook up the submit. So const on submit is a function with the event. We know this is going to be an Axios call. So then down here, we're going to do an Axios dot post HTTPS localhost 5001 /API/shelter. I actually forget what it is.
So once you like upload your API, you have to go in and change all those links. Is there a quick tool for that?
Yeah. Yeah. So there's two things to do. One is to abstract all of those into a configuration file. Just change it once. And every place where we reference it, we just reference that. The other way is to use a different project setup. So right now our project setup is two distinct apps, right? We have our .NET thing and our React app. They are dumb for each other. They don't know each other at all. But there's a way to set it up so your React app lives inside of your .NET app. Instead of calling to someplace else to get the data, it's just calling back home to get the data.
It's probably quicker.
It's no, because you're still making the call back. Advantages is that you don't have to worry about the configuration nightmare of, hey, my testing environment, my dev environment, or my beta environment, or my production environment for like the URLs. It's always calling home. But the other side is now your UI and your backend are a bit more tightly coupled.
So, two questions.
Yeah.
Does, when starting, say, for example, a project like this, is it best practice to have that? And if it is best practice, how do you know that you're going to need that? How do you pull that in order for it to actually do exactly what you just said?
Yeah, so this is where like the iterative process comes into play.
Mhm.
So like, if my initial problem is, hey, I need to display all my pets that are up for adoption.
Mhm.
That problem by itself, just that's actually something you can do week one, right? That's like a static website. You said, hey, here's a bunch of pictures of my pets, stuff like that. Once you start adding on requirements, like, oh, they should be able to adopt it in the UI. They should be able to search for a pet. They should be able to add a shelter. They should be able to put a pet up for adoption. All those things kind of say, oh, now we need to do more things. So, and that's up to some senior developer or whoever you're working with to go, hey, you know what? This is great to have two distinct apps. Because if we have two distinct apps, then we can have our API, then we can have our website, our React app. But then we can have mobile apps that also talk to the same API. We can have IoT things that still talk to the same API that consume the data. So maybe you need that distributed system to solve your problem. But maybe you're building, I'm building a website and that's it. So I'm going to put my React app inside of my .NET app and just call it a day.
Okay.
So you'll see both out there. Does that answer your questions?
Yes.
So shelter, post to shelter. Cool. So it's to shelter. We want to pass it the event.form data. And then once we get back, we want to, let's just console.log it and see what happens. I can't not do that. So let's see what this sends over. In our network, max capacity is 100. How much are we going to bill? 45. That's it. So over our network tab, we should see a post to our shelters endpoint with our data. And inside of that return value, we should see the ID with all of our information there. So let's submit it. Maybe. Refresh the page, make sure we're on the latest version. Freedom Farm. barn. Max capacity is 100. Who's in charge? Farmer Gump. We call Ghostbusters. There we go. Here's our 201. We got that created. ID 3, Freedom Farm. It's all there. So now if we go to add a pet inside of our pet shelter, we can now add pets to Freedom Farm. So how are we feeling with that?
Very cool.
So if we go back to the requirements, we submitted the shelter to the API. Now let's say, hey, after you've added a shelter, let's ask the user, hey, you've added a shelter successfully. Do you want to go add a pet to that shelter? So a little bit like quality of life for the user experience. Because normally if I'm going to add a shelter, odds are I'm doing one of two things. I'm adding a whole bunch of shelters at a time, so I just want to keep on submitting shelters. Or I added a shelter that I want to add a pet to. So you want to display the message for adding a pet. And really, what does that look like? Well, it's probably going to be a div. Successfully added a shelter. Add a link. Do you want to add a pet? And that link is going to be to /add. And now this div, let's use a little bit of Bootstrap to our advantage. Because remember, we are using Bootstrap, right? So let's use that to our advantage. We want to style that in some sort of meaningful way. So I want to go to one of these, and I want to use this one right here, a simple success alert. And all I have to do is add those classes. Link is not defined. Hey, there it is, down there at the bottom, styled up and looking pretty. But I wanted to only show after I've successfully added a shelter. So, the same way we used our isLoading thing back on the other page, we're going to use that kind of exact same concept here. Const added shelter. Added shelter, set added shelter equals use state set to false. So now it should not be there whenever we start up the page, but if we add another shelter, naming things is hard, that shelter over there, charge not me, definitely not me. After we submit it and comes back, it says successfully added a shelter. Do you want to add a pet? Click that, go to that pet page.
So it's a different type of conflict.
It is. It's using a link to help help the user navigate around. Cool deal. So, homework tonight. Finish up the Universe Explorer. Kind of work with that. I believe we're going to assign the weekend homework today. I think so. But pretty much what it is it's an API that we've already worked with during Unit 2. You're just going to rebuild it. So you have an option of either doing one list, the one list API that we worked with. You could rebuild that. Or if you found a really cool API from your API Explorer homework, you could choose to rebuild that and add some features to that. It is going to be a group project, groups of 2 or 3, self-organized.
Before we go, could you talk to us about Friday?
Yeah, Friday is coming up in 2 days. It's a great day of the week. We have. What about Friday?
Okay, Friday, you said that we're supposed to be going somewhere Friday.
Yes, we are. We are going to a place called Presence.
Okay, is there a specific dress code that we should be